you focus on art and healing. And we all know that there is a lot of healing to do in the world today, both individually and collectively.
I did not sketch to be an artist, I sketched to heal. And there's something about the black and white, the negative and positive, that forced me to see the duality of life. That's the first thing. Being perfect and pursuing perfectionism may feel good because you feel like, oh, everything is exactly how it's meant to be, but you're trying to control an outcome that is uncertain. So uncertainty is the shadow. The path is be vulnerable with you first. So when I sketch every day, I'm being vulnerable with me. I don't care what the world thinks about me. I don't care what the Instagram audience thinks about me. I'm being vulnerable with me. And what's happened though is as I was sketching, I realized something was happening within me. My breath started to regulate. I started to find stillness that I'd never found before. And I thought, wow, do people know art heals? If I didn't walk this path, guess what I'd be doing right now? I'd be telling my daughter to walk the path of light. Be good, always be good, take care of others. The shadows, oh, don't get angry, don't be sad, just always be grateful. And I'm teaching her the same thing that was taught to me, that I'm basically making her feel that there's a lot of shame in the darkness. Yes, 100%. If the world could be more compassionate, we'd be a different world.
Sheila, hi, and welcome to the Shades of Life podcast.
Thank you so much, Ingrid. So good to see you.
Thank you. And I am very, very happy to have you as a guest today, as you focus on art and healing. And we all know that there is a lot of healing to do in the world today, both individually and collectively. So we can definitely do with your wisdom today and your words of advice in this area and how we can use art for healing. So our first question for you, your art and the sketches that you do, and we can see one in your background. That's perfect. So people can see what it is about. So your art and your sketches are absolutely fascinating, very flowing as well, I find. So I wanted to ask you, when and how did art enter your life? And has it been a constant throughout your life as well?
Yeah. So first of all, thank you again for having me. It's always really an honor to be able to share my story with others, because as you said, there's so much healing that the world needs right now, individually and collectively. And that's how it all started. That's how SketchPoetic started. Huh? My backstory real quickly is I grew up in the business world, meaning I was very academically performance oriented, and coming from my Asian upbringing, I was very driven. And my career pretty much started in the corporate world. And then I got to the height of my career and got everything I ever wanted. And then I got there and emotionally, mentally, physically, and spiritually, I was disconnected. And I think I didn't acknowledge it at the time. But what was interesting is I ended up having this debilitating fear of flying, and my anxiety was off the charts. Okay. And it was actually addressing my fear of flying that got me to address my mental health. So there's a lot more to that story. But when I started to address my mental health, I realized how much of my emotions I had been avoiding and suppressing, and trauma as well, and all of those backstories that you hear of people pursuing their mental health. But what I did not expect, which is why we're here today, is I did not expect that my daily sketching practice. So what ended up happening is the hypnotherapist that I saw to address my fear of flying encouraged me to find a healthy way to express my emotions. Okay. And I remembered as a kid, I used to draw. Okay. And I thought, why don't I sketch daily? And I call it sketching for a reason. I'll share that later on. But I started sketching daily purely with the purpose to purge and release my emotions. And what ended up happening is I found my purpose along the way. So that's kind of my backstory. I started sketching daily on April 19th, 2017. So it's been over 7 years now.
Ooh, okay. Yeah, quite a while. That's a really, really beautiful story. So really your entry point was a challenge you had to overcome. with your anxiety. And yeah, that gave birth to something absolutely amazing. And I think that's a story we see often. But that's amazing to hear it from you. So you created a platform of creative expression. You mentioned the name. It is called SketchPoetic. So I wanted to ask you what prompted you to create it and how significant was it for you to create it personally?
Yeah,
well, you've already given an element of answer.
Yeah.
Yes.
To expand on what I was saying earlier, first of all, the name SketchPoetic is a play on the word wax poetic. And when we wax poetic, it's a colloquialism for not knowing what you're going to say. It's organic. There's no clear outcome. You're just riffing or improvising. And that's why I call it sketching, because in the art world, sketches are loose, they're fast, and they're not always meant to be seen. And that's the metaphor of what I wanted to do. I didn't do it for an audience. I certainly didn't do it to become SketchPoetic, the artist. I did it because I wanted to address my mental health. So that's how it started. Yourself. Yeah, exactly. And that's how it started. And then the platform, I guess, or the artist name came about because I started posting on Instagram. So when I started social media, I didn't do it to get likes or followers. I wanted a visual diary, basically. And I knew that because Instagram is, it's a daily thing. I saw the timestamp. It held me accountable. So I genuinely did it as an accountability partner. And then what ended up happening is I started tagging it certain words, like I would, whatever the emotion I was expressing or arts. Yeah. And then people started to follow me and people started to share their stories. So I started building a community on Instagram, and that's kind of how it became a bigger thing.
Wow, that's amazing. And thank you for explaining the meaning behind the name, because, I'm French. And although I'm fluent in English, I actually didn't know what wax poetic means. So that's really interesting to know the meaning behind it and how you made the link with the name of your practice. So as you explained earlier, you have a background in business prior to creating SketchPoetic, which I find very interesting as a transition. So I think we have understood that this new creative platform was a real turn in your life. I wanted to ask you, because it has been quite a turn in your life from business to something very creative and around sketching. Have you been initially perhaps subject to criticism when you took this new path with SketchPoetic? And did people around you understand what you were trying to achieve with it, or did you have to take them along a journey with you?
Wow, first of all, that's a really great question, because there's two parts to that answer. The first part is I never did it as a second path. So one of the reasons I believe my story is important for people to hear is I was a breadwinner, and now, we're a 2-person income household now. But at the beginning of my journey, I was the main breadwinner and I had to work. So it's not like I started daily sketching and then decided to pursue art. That was never my story. My story was I was burnt out, disconnected, suffering from debilitating anxiety, and I wasn't present. And I still needed to pay the bills. Yeah. So for a long part of my journey, probably the last year is the only part of my journey where I started working part-time. But up until a year ago, I was still working full-time. And I was doing this as a side thing, but now it's no longer a side hustle. So in America, they call this thing called a side hustle. Yeah. It's the thing that you do and the thing you love, right? What ended up happening is both became integrated into my life. Every morning, and that's the story of the origin of SketchPoetic, is I was so burnt out, I quit that job, found another job that wasn't as intense, wasn't as chaotic. And then every day before I went to work, I would go to a coffee shop and I would sketch every day. And in doing so, I started to integrate both my personal and professional life. And what's happened, though, is as I was sketching, I realized something was happening within me. My breath started to regulate. I started to find stillness that I'd never found before. And I thought, wow, do people know art heals? It was such a moment. And then because my background, exactly, right, aha moment. And because my background is business, I used to facilitate workshops. And that's how it all started with me doing this for other people, is I thought, do people know art heals? Maybe I can show them the way. And that's when I started hosting workshops before COVID. And then when COVID hit, I did Zoom sessions and I started connecting with all these people around the world. And that's how this all became and blossomed into something bigger than what it is today. Than what it was.
Yeah, no, that's such a beautiful path and evolution, because you started by doing two things in parallel, but then you also connected them along the way, which totally makes sense. And again, I think a lot of people will be able to relate to this. Even me today, you know, I do two things in parallel as well. I know many people who do the same today, and there is nothing wrong with it. Well, that's how you,
Yeah, but if anything, I feel more people need to hear it, because there's this story or narrative in the world that to live your purpose, to live being an artist, you have to pursue this one path. And the truth is, there is no one path to anything in life, one. Two, I believe there is a new path for artists and creators out there for people like me, because I didn't do it to be in a gallery. I didn't do it to become an artist. I didn't do it to sell my art. I did it to address my mental, physical, spiritual, and emotional health. And in the process, though, I found my purpose. So it wasn't even intentional. But of course, what does God and the universe and life tell you when you start to live from a place of inner value, inner healing? Everything around you changes, right? And that's what ended up happening. I started feeling comfortable with who I was.
Yeah, and that's the best way to start. And also, because you were very true with yourself and what you were feeling, and perhaps you were a bit in a dark place, but you bounced back from it in the most beautiful way. And then, as you said, this is when you found your purpose as well. And it sounds like it was a very natural journey as well for you.
It was, and that's why my sketches are so flowy, because my expressions mimic my journey. My journey has been an organic flow. But the other thing that I believe is really a huge part of my journey that is, I hope resonates with people is, you know, there's in the mental health space, there's a lot of talk about trauma, right? Gabor Mate talks about it. The Body Keeps Score. It talks a lot about trauma. The thing that I believe more people need to hear is oftentimes when you talk about trauma, you hear the word addiction, you hear about mental health disorders. I had debilitating anxiety, but in the external world, I was deemed very successful. Right? I was a corporate executive.
In a world.
Right? But what I'm trying to show is it doesn't always look like addiction. It doesn't always, I was a traumatized person living a perceived healthy life, but I wasn't healthy. So I want more people to have a vulnerable and open discussion that you could be perceived by the world as successful, as healthy, as all of these things, but inside I was not. In any way I would define success. And so that's why I share my story, and that's why I do the work I do, because there's so much more people out there traumatized in the corporate world, in the business world, than there are in the wellness.
There are masks. There is a facade. I can't remember. I probably have questions about this later.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. But it's survival. We're surviving. That's all it is.
And do you know where your anxiety was stemming from?
Yeah, it's because to me, the definition of anxiety is the physical definition is energy in my body I wasn't releasing, and emotions. And for me, the answer is I had a lot of rage, a lot of deep, deep sadness, and a lot of shame I was not expressing. That's where my anxiety came from. So anytime I felt those three emotions, I would push it down and it would become anxiety because I didn't want to feel it. I didn't want to, not only did I not want to feel it, I didn't want to see it because it would ruin the facade and the brand and the image that I
and they are very common symptoms. I certainly suffer from stress and anxiety like many, most people. But the way for me it comes out is more through migraines, for example. And I am doing work to bring the flow back to the energies inside, which is really interesting. I've actually had a really interesting Kundalini experience recently, and I'm having another one, but it's all about having your flow of energy move better throughout your body and your chakras. And that's really interesting. And that's probably what also attracted me to your work, because you can really feel the flow. It's like water moving
Thank you. Thank
in your
you.
sketches. It's absolutely beautiful. So another question, why do you use sketching as a means of expression over a different form of art? Was it about drawing that works for you in particular? And I'm asking, and I mean, that's probably also why I'm attracted to your work, because I've been drawing all my life since I was a child. So I'm particularly attracted, I mean, to many forms of art, but drawing holds a special place for me.
Oh, I love that you asked this question, because I get this a lot. Why drawing? Why sketching?
Yeah.
Because it's a metaphor for me. I love the starkness of black and white.
Okay.
Again, I did not sketch to be an artist. I sketched to heal. And there's something about the black and white, the negative and positive, that forced me to see the duality of life. That's the first thing. But a more practical reason is I was a perfectionist and I was a people pleaser. And that was the two wounds I was trying to address, right? As I was always a pleaser and I was a perfectionist. And when you sketch with a pen, you cannot undo it. You cannot unsee it. It's there. So what ended up happening is I ended up healing some of those reasons I was perfectionist, the reasons I needed to feel like I was pleasing the world, because I was confronting it. So what would happen is, as I started, inevitably there'd be something I do and I'd be like, oh, I don't like it. I want to throw it away. Or gosh, that just ruin my piece, right? And in those moments, instead of throwing it away, and normally I would either start a new sketchbook or I would tear the page and throw it in the garbage, I was able to look at it and go, why did I feel like I ruined it? Why does it feel like this needs to be not seen by the world, or for me, really? And so I started asking questions and I became curious. And curiosity kills judgment. It kills criticism, because it cannot live in the same plane.
Yeah.
And this happens in the world. If somebody is judging and criticizing you, if you start to ask them questions and you have them engage in questioning why they believe what they believe, you will find that the energy of it dissipates, because
it's a release.
It's a release. Exactly. And curiosity is just being more curious about the why behind it. So I was always a perfectionist, but I never asked myself, why am I a perfectionist? And by the way, the short answer to that question is I needed to find safety. I thought if I was perfect, if everyone liked me, nobody would hurt me. And that is flawed. That is not true. I could be perfect. I could be a good girl. I could be pleasing to everyone. But life happens, and bad things happen to good people all the time. It has nothing to do with how good you are and how, saintly you are. And that's the lesson that art taught me, is no matter what happens. And that's why I posted every day, every sketch I did every day. I don't do it as much now, but it's because I was able to make peace that every expression was meaningful and it had its place in the world, just like I did.
Wow. So I'm just realizing that you probably have a lot in common, because I can really identify with what you're saying. Yeah, that's amazing, because I've always loved also the detailing of drawing. And there's definitely some perfectionism in it. And myself, I have actually not drawn since the beginning of last year, and I don't feel a need for it. But I think I have released a lot of control, perhaps, I don't know. And things are definitely flowing a lot more, and I can feel it. Yeah, that's fascinating to listen to you when you describe it. I can definitely relate to it. So that's really interesting what you just shared with us, because my next question relates to something you've just said. So you live in California, Sheila, but you have Filipino heritage. And I wanted to ask you, would you say your origins influence your art, your creative expression in any way? But from what you've shared with us, and because I have also friends who are from Asia or have an Asian background, and this kind of almost, I don't know if quest is the right word, but this quest for perfectionism, and when you're pushed by your parents as well to be as perfect as possible, and they have all these activities when growing up, So perhaps it's also part of your background around perfection. I don't know, but what's your feedback around that?
The answer is 100%. It had everything to do with why I was the person I am. Remember in the beginning, I said I was academically and performance driven. That was because I was an Asian child.
Yeah.
And Asian children, it's not a stereotype, it is the culture, is that we're very driven to please our parents because not only do we feel compelled to get straight A's or to get a career, but it is in our culture to support our family. So it is by design and by necessity. The second thing is, and this is an important discussion point, because in the world, we're so divided, right? Asians, Black, Mexican, Spanish, French,
communities,
that communities and cultures are subdivided, and we're becoming more and more separated. But what's really powerful about art, and what I see in my art, and what I see in the people that are healing, is that we have universal issues and challenges. And going back to me being Asian, all of us are immigrants in some way, right? In the world, we're all immigrants in some way. Yeah, and so what we have is a lineage of immigrant stories, of ancestral stories. And every generation that came before us hopes and dreams that this next generation is better, is going to do more in the world, is going to learn from the lessons we passed. So imagine getting born into the world when there's all these expectations and hopes and dreams already on your shoulders, right? And not only hopes and dreams, but also pain and trauma and war and all this. And so the reason, and you can hear me getting impassioned, is we were born with darkness and light. We were born with the hope and the dreams, which is the light, but we were also born with the war and the pain and the violence and all the reasons we've hurt each other, right? And that is healing. My definition of healing, Ingrid, isn't all light. It is the ability to sit in both and find peace, ease, and grace in both, because we have it in us. And so that's the reason art heals, is that art allows us to see both, but it allows us to sit in both and find peace in it, because that's what art does. It allows us to find that inner peace and that inner harmony and that connection to something greater than ourselves.
Yeah, that's really beautiful, Sheila. There are two things that came to mind when you were talking. The first one is when I look at the younger generations today, there is so much anxiety around climate change in particular. And that's an additional burden they have on their shoulders, that they are born with it now. So it's, that's part of the heritage you were talking about. And the second thing is, when we look at all the divisions in the world, as we were talking about, art is a common language. You don't have to be, from France, from the Philippines, from wherever. It's a common language. It's like sport, for example, when, people can come together in a nation that can be seemingly divided. A sport can help them to come together, and art could do this on a global basis, basically.
No, thank you for saying that and bringing that up, because you notice when I say I'm an advocate, I say arts with an S, arts and healing. It's because music, those things, poetry, they all have an ability to connect. And often the three things that I just talked about, visual art, music, and dance, don't even have words. And that is why it's healing. And it's exactly what ended up happening during COVID. I would do these Zoom workshops, and we would sketch through anxiety or anger or sadness. And it didn't matter if you were from France or from Africa or from Asia or from Australia. We talked about our lines. We talked about the marks. We talked about the feeling of the marks. And as you said, the reason you connect with my work is you feel it before you see it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely. No, that's beautiful. And I will have a number of artists on the Shades of Life podcast, because I think the arts, as you say, are just so important. And, you can relate to one or the other better, more or less. It depends, depending on your own sensitivities.
Yes, exactly.
And I just want to mention one that I will have probably after you, and it is with a dancer. And I find dance is very flowing as well, right?
Yes.
It's someone absolutely amazing. But I came across this thought that, when you look at dance, it's a moment in time, contrary to your drawings. Once it is on a sheet, you can keep it, you can look back at it, but dance, it's in a moment.
You can't undo it.
Yeah, and that's really beautiful as well. And that brings something else. So I need to check my questions.
No, it's great. Thank you. This is great. I feel very connected.
Yeah. Okay, so you are an advocate for art and healing. How does drawing, so if we dive a little bit deeper now, how does drawing connect to healing? How can art support people, help them heal their wounds, or overcome the things that hold them back?
Yes, this is the reason I exist.
Yeah.
You asked, why did somebody in the business world become an advocate for arts and healing? It's because I'm able to speak to people that don't speak the language of healing. So in certain communities, if I say the word healing, it feels they call it woo-woo, very spiritual, right? But I'm also going to answer it in a very scientific way.
Yeah.
And this is truly my definition of healing. Healing is when you bring your unconscious and your subconscious to the conscious field. That is my definition of healing. So you ask me, how does art heal? It's because when you draw versus doing it for healing, if I just told you to draw a house, a landscape, a horse, an apple, you're not doing it to heal. You're doing it to draw an object. Yeah. Now, if I said to you, Ingrid, I want you to sketch or draw to heal your wounds, to allow yourself to express what wants to be seen. Because what happens is when we're drawing, we don't necessarily tap into the thoughts and the emotions. Watch next time you draw, Ingrid. Yeah. There will be memories, words, images that come through. It could be the most random things too. It could be a yellow dress, a turtle, a moment in time. And you know what most people do? They push it away because I'm trying to draw an apple. Yeah. Right. But next time you draw an apple and you say, I want to do it for the purpose of healing, there are going to be things in your subconscious and unconscious that want to show something.
So you're not going to draw in the same way.
Yes. That's why my stuff looks abstract. It's because I never know, unless I'm doing a commissioned piece where I know it's specifically what I'm sketching, but 99% of my sketches, and this is, if you can look at my Instagram, I never know what I'm going to sketch because I'm not doing it with the purpose of sketching something with an outcome. I'm doing it because I want my subconscious and unconscious to engage and say, Sheila, this is what you need to see today. Sheila, this is what you need to feel today because it is in you to feel it and see it. And I just want to talk about one other part of my practice that I'm very, very passionate about, and that's my body. I call it an embodied practice because I engage my breath. I pay attention to all my tingles and pains and feel, like sensations. That's why dancing is such a big part of my practice to movement. It's because when I'm sketching, I'm paying attention to my body. And that's also trying to bring things to me. So for example, yesterday I was sketching and my lower back was activating. And I've often found that whenever my lower back activates, it's because I've said yes to something I shouldn't have said yes to.
Oh, wow. So
right?
And body reaction.
Yeah, but I've been able to make those connections because I've done it enough times. And I've said every day I've sketched and these sensations come up or my ears are ringing. And I go, okay, what is the commonality of those times when my back is hurting? And I'm like, oh, I said yes to something I shouldn't have said yes to. And I'm like, oh, there you go. And so my body is talking to me. It's fascinating. And that's why I want you to sketch and draw with that intention, because your conscious mind wants to see all this stuff. Now, here's the bigger part of healing that I'll just end with here. Once you see it, right? Once you hear it and see it and feel it, what you do with that is up to you, but that's also enough. The thing about the world is, they talk about doing versus being, right? Being is just being able to see things and sit with it because it's uncomfortable. But the world tells us we got to do stuff all the time. Like, oh, you see it, now act on it. And I'm telling you, no, 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 no. Seeing it is enough. That is the healing. So every time I see a sketch, I'm healing because I'm seeing it in action. That's enough. So that's the reason I've been able to go down this path of healing.
Yeah, incredible. I love your explanations. We are going to talk about surrender later in the conversation, and that's a really good discussion to have. So I think you touched base a little bit on my next question, but I wanted to share a quote with everybody from someone, I'm not going to pronounce the name correctly, but someone called Master Shiheng Yi, who does Taoist teaching in a temple in Germany. And he says, you can't see the proper light if you have never indulged in the very, very deepest dark times. So I wanted to ask you, would you agree? And what is it evocative of to you? Because also when I look at your drawing, I mean, for me in this quote, there is an energy of yin and yang that I really like. And if we make an analogy to sketching, and that's certainly true for yours, it's like applying ink to a white sheet. You wouldn't see the ink if the sheet was black. And you would only see the sheet if the ink was white. You wouldn't see the drawing. So the contrast between the two is necessary to appreciate the drawing. And then if we go back to this notion of flow and dance, you know, it's the same. It's the dance between the yin and the yang. And it's contrasting, but it also interacts with each other, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I would say if you had to describe my art in any way, it definitely is a duality. It is a integration of darkness and light, truly, not just literally because it's black and white. But what that quote was very resonant to me because what I have learned in my healing journey, and this is my belief, my philosophy, I would say my definition of where my path is when I say I'm on a spiritual path is, imagine most of my life, I was pursuing this path of light. And what that means in the world usually is you're good to people and they're good to you. You do good in the world and you give back to the world. It's always this idea of giving and being positive. What I've come to learn is that is no longer my definition of the human experience, because every light comes with its shadow and dark, and every dark comes with a shadow and light. So going back to perfectionism is a great example. Being perfect and pursuing perfectionism may feel good because you feel like, oh, everything is exactly how it's meant to be, but you're trying to control an outcome that is uncertain. So uncertainty is the shadow. Uncertainty and the unknown is the dark. So they live together. So even though we think we've got everything perfect, on the shadow side of it is the world saying the human experience is like, Sheila, you're fooling yourself because nothing in life is by design. Same thing with joy, by the way. So if you talk to anyone that's recently been through some pretty hard trauma, and trauma doesn't have to be big trauma, it could be little trauma. And let's just say they've had to watch somebody they love die, or they've just recently lost someone. So let's just use grief as an example.
Yeah.
Sometimes people have this thing called survivor's guilt because they're still here and they have a hard time sitting in joy because they're in the darkness of sadness and grief. But the light side of that is joy. And oftentimes we don't want to sit in joy because we feel guilty, or we feel like this person isn't here to experience this with me. Or this is the one that was related to me. If I feel this, it's not going to last. So why even feel it? So there's fear in joy. And so that's the human experience, is for every darkness and shadowed feeling, there is a light side to it. And for every light side, there is a darkness to it. And I think the invitation, Ingrid, for humans, especially in the world that's chaotic and is somewhat scary for a lot of us in the world, the invitation is, can we find inner peace and harmony even in the chaos of this world? And the answer is yes. Do I have moments where I'm stressed? Absolutely. Do I have moments where my body is completely in pain because of the stress and anxiety? Absolutely. But can I more often than not find that moment of stillness and peace that eluded me before? Yes, I can. And that's really the invitation. And that's why I sketch, because sketching is the first thing I can do that gets me in a moment of like, there I am. There I am. This is who I've always been. I've always been this person, right?
And you find your peace like this, right? Yeah. That's beautiful. Yeah. That's beautiful. There is an image that I've had a lot in mind these past weeks and months of a coin, because there is always two sides to a coin. And it's like you said, the light and the darkness, and they coexist together at all times. You can't dissociate them, right? That's exactly what you're saying.
And people want to, though. That's the thing, is that, especially as a parent, if I didn't know this, right? If I didn't walk this path, Ingrid, let's say my purpose was calling me my entire life, clearly, but I didn't listen to the call. Yeah. If I didn't walk this path, guess what I'd be doing right now? I'd be telling my daughter to walk the path of light. Be good, always be good, take care of others. The shadows, don't get angry, don't be sad, just always be grateful. And I'm teaching her the same thing that was taught to me, that I'm basically making her feel that there's a lot of shame in the darkness.
We need to be perfect, right?
Yeah. But more important, I think for me, there's value in the darkness. And I do believe, I genuinely do believe some of the most resilient the most profound leaders have had to go through a lot to get there, because their resiliency and overcoming the challenges. Now, dare I say that even if you've had a privileged life, dare I say, it does not say that you're not any more or less better than this person. That's not what I'm saying. I really want to caveat that, because compassion is one of the things I lead with. It is simply to say that people that have had challenges to overcome often don't have a choice but to learn from it to get to survive, right? So people that have had a privileged life, maybe they learn their lessons in other ways. But I know for sure people that have had go through trauma that overcame them had to learn it, and that's the way they had to learn it.
Yeah, that's such great insights. And I like what you say also about seemingly successful people, because I think you mentioned this before. It's not because you're successful that first you're happy. So I think we need to make the difference between the two. But I've just covered a theme around space. And so I've looked into the billionaires like Elon Musk, for example. I've watched interviews with him. And even today, he's actually, I think, the richest person in the world. He was working on an amazing project. He's a visionary. He probably has a lot going on with his own mental health, as we all know. But, I watched several interviews with him when he was like crying, like literally crying in front of the camera. And when he was explaining everything he had to go through, everything he still has to go through, because, it's not because you're worth billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars, that it helps. It's still life. It's life for everybody. I think we need to be able to, as you say, both see the abundance and the shadows, because they will always be there.
Always. Elon Musk is a interesting study of a human experience. Yeah. When I say the human experience, in my art, and I talked about this recently in one of I record my time lapses, and I've just recently started doing voiceovers and captioning them because I want to share that wisdom that comes with my sketching. But in it, I talk a lot about energy. So when you stare at my art, I believe there's a resonance and energy. And depending on how tuned in you are, you may even hear music. You might even hear words. But you definitely feel something, because that's the intention in which I express it. Yeah. Now, coming back to Elon Musk, to me, when I look at him, I see energy. I don't see Elon Musk. Just like if I saw a homeless person on the street, I see energy. And I don't think I would have looked at people that way had I not started sketching every day. Because now I realize, yes, we are a vessel. I happen to choose this Asian woman vessel. But I could have chosen a French woman that lives in the UK. The reality is,
our place is already taken.
Yeah, exactly. But the reality is, this is just a vessel. And if you scrape the vessel, scrape me, like scrape the physical, and you blindfolded me, and now you just hear my voice. And even my voice has changed.
Yeah.
I still speak with a certain cadence, but before my daily sketching, I spoke 100 miles an hour. I was a very, very fast talker because I didn't even want to pause.
Oh, wow.
And that was very indicative of my mental and emotional health because I didn't make space for anything. Because if it was silent, if I was still, I was afraid somebody or something was going to hurt me. And so when I found stillness in my sketching, I found safety in it. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is what safety feels like. It's not external, it's internal. That's why I talk a lot about arts and healing, because it's not an external thing. I'm not asking you to find that stillness outside of you, because you can't control the world. But what you can do is find that stillness within you. And that's why I started, and that's how I overcame my fear of flying. I fly a lot more now. Is now when turbulence hits, I get scared still sometimes, especially if it's bad turbulence. But before I used to be terrified. Now I just find that inner stillness, and I really truly try to go inward. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the work we all need to do for sure, finding your balance, your peace, your inner peace. And then it shines through. And I love what you said about energy, because I've come to realize over the years that I am what people call an empath. And
Yes.
for me, I pick on the energy of people first. It's almost like energy is my first language, but I can immediately pick on the energy of people. And I love what you said about this, because yeah, whoever you are, your energy defines you and defines your experience in this life.
Yeah, I mean, I just had this interesting visual that came through. So I'm intuitive, so I'll just trust my intuition. As you were talking, I had this visual of imagining us on another side of a door, a closed door. And would I want to open that door? Yes, because you have this inviting energy. But I guarantee you, if you did this experiment with people, with everyone in their life, whether it was their parent on the other side of that door, somebody they worked with on the other side of that door, and you really ask them, feel the energy, do you want to open that door? I guarantee you, it'd be an interesting experiment. How accurate your intuition is. Like, I don't want to open that door. And it's probably somebody on the other side that you have some energetic resistance or challenge with, or I can't wait to open that door. And that's how strongly I believe in energy. I just had that visual, and I'd be interested to do that.
Yeah, that's great. I love it.
And then, of course, then you add complete strangers to the mix. That's a whole different thing. But I'm saying, why don't you do it with people you actually know? You might be surprised, because we have opportunities to heal our relationships all the time if we were to look at people as energy. And that's where my art has helped me heal, Ingrid, is that I look at people like works of art now. Some works of art,
beautiful. Yeah, absolutely.
Some works of art evoke like fear in me, and some works of art, I just want to sit there and just stare at it because I find so much beauty in it. But they're both invitations for me to look at something within me I may need to see. And that's really ultimately why art heals. Yeah.
And I really think when you look at people and at the world in this way, you develop a lot of compassion, wherever people are.
Yes, 100%. If the world could be more compassionate, we would be a different world.
Yeah. So what you said about your use of words and how it has evolved is really interesting. Because I actually love the words you use on some of your videos to accompany a drawing. And I have picked on some quotes, I think, for the next question. So there is one where you say that sight will become insight, and seeing goes beyond what our eyes allow us to witness. So I wanted to ask you, how important would you say is it to visualize your thoughts, your emotions, what's going on inside?
Oh, it's so timely that you would ask me this question, because this is a new insight I just got this past few weeks. For a long time in SketchPoetic journey, and I say SketchPoetic as an artist and an advocate for mental health, I thought people have a hard time feeling their emotions because they don't want to feel it. But guess what I'm learning? People don't want to see it. So they will buy my book and they'll put it on the dresser and they won't touch it. Or they want to buy my book and they haven't bought it yet. And so what that tells me is a couple of things. One, people must be ready. So this is going back to the word compassion. Whenever somebody tells me, oh, I'm sorry, I haven't bought your book, or I bought your book and I haven't done it, I say, first of all, thank you for wanting to buy my book. But more importantly, you never have to apologize, because guess what? You're not ready. And that's not a judgment. It is the fact, because when you are ready, you will do it, because you will feel called to do it. Just like I waited 42 years of my life to come back to the artist self. I mean, that took me a long time. Well, maybe not 42, because I abandoned my art at 15. But anyway, do the math. It's about 30 years. But what I'm trying to say is people are not ready, and it's okay. Right. And so that's the thing. So the reason people might not want to turn sight into insight. So what ended up happening, remember I said the subconscious and unconscious comes to the conscious field. So when I think about emotions, there's 3 parts to emotions. So this is more, again, I don't know if this is science or just my own belief system, but I want to caveat that. There's the feeling of the emotion, right? You feel it. There's the identification of it. There's the intellectualizing of it.
Yeah.
Right. And the expression. And then there's the making a meaning out of it. This is the 3rd part. This is the insight. So I'll use anger.
Yeah.
I can feel anger, right? But not express it. So I might be angry in my life, but I was told not to express it. So I just don't. I could be the opposite. I could express anger, but might not really feel the reasons why I'm angry. Maybe I'm not really angry at life. What I'm really feeling is grief. What I'm really feeling is abandoned. What I'm really feeling is depression. But I don't want to feel those feelings, so I'll just be angry. And then the 3rd part is finding meaning in all of it. That is why art heals, because I do all 3 of those things. Sometimes I'm expressing an emotion. Sometimes I'm feeling it. And sometimes I find insight in it. So sight becomes insight. That's why.
Ah, that's so beautiful, Sheila. Yeah, and it's about expressing all of it. Yeah, absolutely.
And seeing it, that's the key. Seeing it is the key.
Yeah, visualizing.
Because it's outside of you. It's outside of you now. It's not inside of you. We hold it in all the time.
Yeah, there is so much repression. And sometimes as you say, we are not even conscious of it. Yeah, absolutely.
That's why. Yeah. There's no judge. That's why I'm so compassionate, because most of us are unconscious.
Yeah. Totally.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's amazing. Next question, I wanted to ask you, so we did mention we would talk about this, and I love this question. How easy or uneasy do you find it to be vulnerable? So we talked about surrendering, which is kind of a similar thing, because it's about not only being able to look within, but also to be able to share it, be seen by others, or perhaps, as we just discussed, to see it yourself. And it's like having also your most intimate self being exposed, whether it's to yourself, I don't know how to say, or to others.
Yeah. So vulnerability is hard because there's tangible reasons and intangible reasons. So I'm going to go to an extreme example. I've worked with compassion prison projects. I've worked with incarcerated men to do what I do. And in their world, Ingrid, it is deadly to be vulnerable. Like they have real reasons that vulnerability can kill them, because if they show any signs of perceived weakness or emotional IQ, they would be a target. Now, I'm using that extreme example because you take a imprisoned, incarcerated person and you put them in the business world. And that person, right, feels that if they're vulnerable, they'll get fired. If they're vulnerable, they'll say something incorrect because there's a perceived danger. So I want to be honest and acknowledge and be compassionate that we are in a world right now with social media, with the volatility, that you say or do the wrong thing, people are going to attack you. There's real danger out there. And so I'm sharing that. So there's the tangible reason that to be vulnerable in this world can come with potential dangers. Now, why am I sitting on this side telling you to be vulnerable? Right? So you're like, Sheila, well, I don't want to be vulnerable if all these things are going to happen. Mm-hmm. What I just described is what? External. All the threats of vulnerability is external. What I just described, whether it's in the business world, whether it's in social media. What I'm saying, though, is if you are allowed to be vulnerable with yourself. So Sheila Darcey, I was not vulnerable with myself, let alone with the world. The path is be vulnerable with you first. So when I sketch every day, I'm being vulnerable with me. I don't care what the world thinks about me. I don't care what the Instagram audience thinks about me. I'm being vulnerable with me. Now, here's what ends up happening. This is why art heals. Is the moment I was able to sit in the feelings I didn't want to feel, in the emotions I didn't want to see, and I started to allow myself to play and imagine all of it in this container of art because it made me feel safe, I noticed that the world around me looked different because my perception of fear was different. The things that I used to fear, I'm no longer afraid. So for example, it's not like the world's any different 10 years. I mean, in the sense of danger, but before I was avoiding danger because I didn't want to have the pain. But now I feel pain because I know I'm supposed to feel it and learn from it. And so I'm no longer afraid of pain. And I'm noticing that, yes, if bad things happen to me now, I'm able to receive it differently because I was able to experience it internally different. So that's why I say vulnerability is not about whether you acknowledge that there's a threat. There is always a threat because we're human. We are surviving in a world that's full of threats. But in your inner world, and you're vulnerable, safety and that feeling of peace is going to counter that feeling. That's the reason why if you look at people in scenes of war and you find these moments of beauty and love and compassion and music and dance, it's because people are trying to find that inner peace, that inner vulnerability. And so for me, I just acknowledge this because art allowed me to be vulnerable with me. And guess what? Now people like you reached out to me because you connected with my vulnerability more than just my art. That's what you felt. You're like, wow, she's super open about all of this stuff.
Yeah.
I wasn't past that.
But it expresses, yeah.
But it's expressed in my art.
Yeah.
You're able to receive it in a vulnerable way. Does that make sense? So
yeah, totally. I really love also that you did start with perhaps a tougher aspect. Yeah, like I have a really good friend who did a short amount of time in prison. And he did tell me, because it's just such a nice and kind person. I mean, he's very tall, so it was an advantage for him and, a good build. But he said to me, Ingrid, I really had to toughen up and show that I was probably stronger than he was to survive, purely to survive. And you're a parallel with social media and, people are so quick to attack people, they don't even try to understand you or the person behind the post, for example. And they are so quick to judge. We've probably all done that at some point in our lives, by the way. I'm not throwing stones at anybody when I say that. We've all done it in one form or another. But yeah, that's very true. And I love your insights about personal vulnerability because for the past 3 years, I've been like you. I had a journey through the corporate world and then I created my own business and I went on a different journey from that point. And initially I shared more of myself and I'm not going to say it's not difficult today to do it. I think it's still difficult. But I think the more you share of yourself, because there is this fear, first of all, I think this is why I was also asking this question about being exposed, because there are friends who are feeling the exact same way, putting yourself out there, whether it's in a social media post, a video, whatever it is, it's like, it's a step forward, it's a leap that you need to take. And there is the fear of being judged probably behind it. But then the more you do it, the more you realize that everybody is the same. People don't care as much as you think they do. there is all of this journey that you take as you become more and more vulnerable. And I think also people connect more with you when you are, that's why I connect with you today.
No, what you just said is the word that we haven't talked about. It's connection. Our world is desperate for meaningful connection. Desperate. Because connection is the way to healing in the collective. So healing ourselves is one thing, connecting to ourselves is one thing. But the reason it becomes healing in the world is once we heal ourselves and we can connect with ourselves, we desire that same connection with others, because now our connection with ourselves is more meaningful, it's more rich, it's more real, it's more genuine. And all of those things you desire to seek with others, right? And so going back to sharing your vulnerability, if I'm sharing my story to connect, and by the way, there's another component to it is connecting with one person is enough. If my art on Instagram changes one person's life, it doesn't matter if I get 1,000 likes. If one person, and by the way, I may never even hear from that person ever. They go through their world and I never even know they existed.
That's such an important point. And I just want to tell you something quickly, because sometimes I say this to myself. How many times in your life has someone told you, I believe in you? I believe you're going to do some great things in your life. How many times did it happen to you? In my life, it happened once, and with someone I didn't know all very well. I'm getting the thumb up. But how many times does it happen? And it goes back to these connections and also supporting each other, isn't it? And if it's just one person, it can make such a difference for you to have heard it even just once.
Yeah. Absolutely. So connection is the expansion of healing. So I have a collective called the Healing Collective, and that's all about connection and community. So community and connection. If people ask me, how do I want to heal the world? I heal myself and help others find their own healing. So that's the reason you'll never hear me say I'm a healer, even though people will say, Sheila, you heal. But I don't call myself a healer because why? It's not because I'm trying to avoid the title. It's because it's not my job to heal others. It is your job to heal yourself. What I do, though, is give you tools, introduce you to people that have other tools like dancers, somatic healers, energy workers, meditation experts, breathwork people, spoken word artists. So what I do is I introduce a toolkit to people to say, hey, guess what? Arts heal. The arts heal. And here's all the people in my collective that do this. You may not like sketching. You might prefer collage. You might prefer poetry. You might even prefer the guitar. But if you did it with the purpose and intention of healing, it feels different. Creating from a place of healing feels different than creating from a place with an audience in mind. Totally different.
Definitely. I love that, Sheila. And that brings me really nicely to my next question. So I wanted to ask you, what would you say to people who may think that drawing is not for them? Because obviously you promote the arts for healing, but obviously you focus more on sketching. And I'm also asking the question because I did an artist residency aboard a Norwegian boat about 1.5 years ago. And we were doing whale watching, and so it was part of my responsibilities one evening to organize a class with the passengers of the boat. And so I draw as simple as possible a whale for them to replicate, but with their own touch. So they could do whatever they wanted, and this is what they did. And I think most of them joined, some even crew passengers joined, and it was great, and they all had a great time. But there is perhaps 1 or 2 people who didn't even want to consider drawing. And perhaps there was a fear of it, or it's not for me, or I don't know how to draw when, I always say you don't need to call yourself an artist to put some lines on paper. So, what would you say to people who may think that drawing or the arts are not for them?
Oh, I get this all the time. So I host my workshops the way I do. One of the first things I do in my workshops is I have people blindfold themselves.
Ooh.
And you can, if you're listening, next time, close your eyes, get a pen, and I say to you, sketch peace. How does it feel to be peaceful? Now, if you considered yourself a non-artist, right? What you would be trying to do is sketch a dove, a peace sign, because you've associated peace with a symbol, an image. So when people tell me they don't know how to draw or they don't know how to be an artist, it's because that's how they're thinking about it. I'm trying to draw a dove. I'm trying to draw a peace sign. So I changed the paradigm. And I say, now close your eyes. And I say, sketch what it feels like to be peaceful, even if you're not feeling it right now. Remember a time you actually felt peace. Maybe you were staring at a lake. Maybe you were watching the sky, sunset, whatever it was. Sketch the feeling. And then they're like, oh, that's different. What do you mean sketch the feeling? So what I do is I give them a comparison. So I say, if I asked a dancer to dance a peaceful dance, would they be moving fast or slow? Would they take up a lot of space, or would they be contained? Would they be dancing around, or do you think they'd be doing slow movements? It starts to click, right? I give them another example. If I told you that you're a conductor in an orchestra, and I say conduct a peaceful sonnet or a peaceful music, would my hands be moving up and down fast? Would it be slow? I said, that's how I treat my pen. I treat my pen as a dancer. I treat my pen as a baton, and the paper is the dance floor, or it's a sheet of music. I said, that's how I think of what I do. And that helps them. So then I put the blindfold on them and I say, how are you feeling right now? Are you feeling anxious? How does it feel to be anxious? And so that's what I do. So what I try to explain to people is I don't consider what I do art. It is artistic. The outcome is art. But what I do is I have to combine it with healing, because the intention of it matters. Like I said, you and I could be doing the same exact drawing or sketch. I draw an apple, you draw an apple. Sure. But if I draw an apple from a place of healing, that apple means something to me, because it's connecting me to something in my subconscious and unconscious that I needed to see. See the difference? Yeah. You just drew an apple.
Yeah. So it looks more meaningful, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, and neither one is better or worse. Yeah. But if you're doing it for the purpose of healing, it matters.
You do it with purpose, with intention. Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you for the explanations. That's actually really useful. So the next question, we might have discussed this a little bit already, but let's see if you have further insights on this. So I tend to think that in a way we are all illustrators. We create invisible lines through every movement. We did talk about dance and, the analogy with dancers. We create invisible lines for every movement, every thought we have, even its energy, its points of transmission. Do you call for this invisible energy to give an impulse to your work? The answer is yes, but let's expand on this.
100% yes. I love, one of my favorite lines in my book is, we create in the margins of our lives. If you watch people, oftentimes, this is an important part of the conversation. You asked me why sketching, and going back to the answering your question. If you look at most people that are on conference calls all day, you find that they're doodling, right? Because they doodle, they expressing visually, or you're planning a party for a friend, you're planning a vacation, you're going to dinner and trying to figure out what to cook for dinner. That is creating in the margins of your life. We just don't call it that, right? Because all creating is taking something that didn't exist before and putting it into existence. That's really what creating is. And so the reason I find sketching and drawing such a powerful tool for healing is it's available to everyone and it's free. So in the world, we have a mental health crisis right now. And we have a shortage of therapists. We have a shortage of services for mental health. If people saw the arts, dancing, music, all of as a viable, not only viable and valid tool, but accessible. It's accessible. So a homeless person on the street can grab a pen from any place, grab a piece of newspaper or trash and sketch. Basquiat's work, right? Basquiat was, on the streets for a long time. That's how he worked. He found things from the world. That makes it no less difference than a corporate person in a conference call, back to back meetings, sketching on a Post-it note, right? They just don't know they're doing it for healing. All I'm doing is saying, guess what? You are, but just be intentional about it. Meaning next time you doodle on a Post-it note, pay attention to what you're doodling, because there's a reason you're doodling that one symbol, or maybe there's a reason you keep on going back to that one spiral. Maybe the spiral means you need to focus. Maybe spiral means your life is going out of control right now. Who knows? But what I'm trying to do is, the only difference between me and somebody that doesn't do it for this reason is intention and awareness and consciousness. And I was just recently in an event called the International Forum on Consciousness. They're inviting more and more artists to these events because consciousness is a word that makes people, it's much more relatable than, let's say, the word healing. Some people have a resistance to the word healing for whatever reason. Yeah. But healing is just consciousness. It's just being conscious. It's being awake. That's all it is.
Yeah, definitely. You also made me think of something when we are talking about spirituality, that, the people who channel spirit, or when, you see a psychic, they do draw lines to channel the energy or the messages. Yeah. And I never really asked myself so much the question about it, but it's part of our conversation, isn't it?
It is.
Okay.
I see you're going to change your way you draw now.
I've known for a very long time, and probably since I've started, that at one point I need to be able to bring more flow to what I do. And I've always kept it under control. So yes, probably at some point it will totally evolve after this conversation. But I know that's an important, almost like turning point for me as well. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So again, it doesn't matter if we repeat some of the topics at some point, but sometimes it's to dive a little bit more in some of them. So how do you decide what to draw? What do these sketches represent to you? And what are you aiming to achieve with each drawing? If we can.
Yes. Yeah. The answer is I never know. Like I said, unless it's a specific image I'm trying to sketch. So for example, it's happened to me a few times. In the 7.5 years I've been doing this, I had a series of women that I did where I put their emotions, but I knew it was going to be a female figure. With the exception of that series, I never know what I'm going to sketch. So the answer to your question is I don't, which is why.
Actually lovely answer, not knowing, just let it come.
Let's talk about this, but I'm going to change the topic, but it's connected to the answer. So you talked about surrender earlier. Surrender is at the core of what I do. When I grab my pen every morning, I surrender to it. Now, here's the reason why I believe people have a hard time surrendering. And it might surprise you, but it won't when you hear the answer. It's because people have a lack of faith. So let me explain the visual. If Ingrid, you're hanging off a cliff right now, and your hands are at the edge of the cliff, and I say to you, Ingrid, surrender. And you're like, Sheila, what the heck? What am I surrendering to? If I let go, what am I going to surrender to? That's faith. I cannot let you surrender if you don't have any faith that you're going to fall to something that's going to serve you. So the reason I found my purpose is when I started sketching and I started getting really uncomfortable because I was trying to be controlling and perfect and judging it. And I started to confront all the reasons I stopped sketching or I stopped being an artist at around 15. And then I kind of played around in college, but I abandoned my artist self because all the things that we talk about, it had to be perfect. It didn't look right, or I couldn't make a living from it. All the reasons people leave their artist self. But when I started to do it to heal, I would sketch and I would confront all those things. And then I started feeling like, oh my gosh, there's something bigger at play because look what I'm creating. I don't know where it's coming from. So reason art is so powerful. And the reason I believe I was called to do this work is when you talk about spirituality, when you talk about God, when you talk about anything around this idea of something bigger than us, it creates resistance because of religion, because of systems, languaging. The language of spirit in the art world is relatable. When people look at my art, they go, where did that come from? And I say the same thing to myself all the time. Where did that come from? So I started to develop faith because I knew something bigger had to be happening, or else this could not be coming through me. That it had to. It genuinely needed evidence. And that's the other thing about why I'm so passionate about what I do is you ask people about faith, and the reason they abandon their faith is they don't see the evidence of it. Well, my art showed me evidence that there's something bigger happening, because there's no way I could do what I do every single day and create what I create if something wasn't flowing through me that wasn't bigger than me. And that's what ended up happening. And this will happen to everyone that really commits to this practice, whether, again, it's music or dance or whatever it is that gets you in that moment of flow, and you commit to healing through this flow. You will have that moment of awe and go, where the heck did that come from? Where did this come from? And you know it's not you. You just know it's not you.
Yeah, sometimes you stop and you're, yeah, absolutely.
But if you have that every day, which is what happens to me, it's like I'm in awe every day. And now I do it when I'm walking on the beach, or I'm having a conversation with you on this podcast. I have moments of awe. Like, how did this beautiful creature come in front of me right now and invite me on her podcast? Like, that's how I feel. Yeah, but I genuinely feel this way.
Oh my God, Sheila. So you don't know that, you couldn't know that. And I didn't want to interrupt you and let you, but the first image you use about having faith, there is an image that I got from a book. So it's more, I was reading a book, but I'm a very visual person. So whatever I read, I visualize it. But it's exactly what you've described. So quickly to explain what it is, because it's been so significant for me in my life. So basically it is a man who is imprisoned, and during a very dark night, he manages to escape the prison, but he doesn't know where he's going. He cannot see anything. So he runs out of the prison. He runs through the dark night. And at some point he can feel that he arrives by the edge of a cliff. And then there's just one way to go. So either he goes, but he doesn't know if he jumps, is there safe ground or not? Or is it the emptiness and he's going to kill himself? He doesn't know. So either he goes back to the prison, or he has a leap of faith in a way, and he jumps. And I always went back to this image in my mind, because it's like we all have to face these moments when we need to have faith. And, there is the uncertainty that's in front of us. We don't know, we only live the present moment. We don't know what the future is. And we all need to have faith. And if you want also, your life to, go to a higher vibration, you need to take a leap of faith on what matters to you, on etc. And yeah, that's exactly what you described. I'm just so glad you brought this up about faith, because we all have to face this.
No, and that's going back to compassion. Thank you. That is the visual, by the way, whenever I meet people that have my book or come to my workshops, is I see them on the ledge and they're looking at me like they're say, Sheila, give me the reason to let go. And I'm like, that's not my job. I'm not here to give you a reason to let go.
That's your decision. Yeah.
What I will do is give you a tool called sketching. And if you sketch your way through it, you will find the reason to let go. That is what I promise. I don't promise you that something's going to catch you. I don't promise you a reason to let go. What I do is give you a tool, which happens to be a pen, and the practice of what I do and the meaning behind it, which is what my book walks through. And I just say, if you can find that stories and the reasons and the narratives in your head that you've lost your way and you've lost your faith in the world and yourself, more importantly, this is about you. If you can find your way back to you, you will let go, because you will want to, because you will feel an awe of it all. And so I just provide tools. This is what I do is a tool. Now, what I've created from it is my own journey. And I hope it inspires other people. but it is not the path to go down. And I'm so passionate about this part of it as well, because I live in LA, Ingrid, and wellness in LA is like synonymous. I mean, there's green juices and fasting and red light therapy. I mean, it's like a wellness epicenter, but there's a dark side to it. The dark side is this is how it looks to be healthy. And I am not of that camp.
Oh, yeah.
I do not say, look at me, Sheila, this is your personification of healthy. No.
Not the template of a model. Yeah, yeah.
No. What I do is say, here's a pen. I wish I had a pen with me. Here's a pen. This is my tool that got me where I am today. That is what I promise, is it's a tool. And so the wellness space, the thing I do have a hard time with and I push against all the time is they give you a visual of what it should look like. And that is not how wellness and holistic health looks to me. How it looks like for you will look very different. But guess what? We can do it through sketching.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. I actually really love your outlook on this because that's something I say to myself often. Like, because, people always have good intentions, like they are always going to give you advice, or you should do this, you should do that, because that's what they do, and that works for them, but it's not foresee what's going to work for you. So you need to, you need to find what works for you. And it goes back to connecting with yourself, and nobody else can do it for you. So I have asked you to do an exclusive drawing for Scarlet Red magazine because I will do an article as well. So I actually wonder what you're going to do now because you don't know what you're going to do.
I'm going to be inspired by this conversation and I'll probably create it today. So we'll see.
I can't wait to see this. So I wanted also to ask you about your drawings, your own sketches. Do you keep a collection of them? Do you revisit them sometimes? Or is each one a one-off to release or transform your own energy?
It's such a good question. I will say I don't revisit them that often. I'm not sure what that's about, but perhaps it's because I see everything as impermanent. The only reason I've had to revisit stuff is I recently had my solo exhibition my first solo show last year, and it felt like a retrospective. So I did have to revisit them. But because my sketches are about emotional expression, it's like reliving a moment of time. So I don't really have the need to relive it. I do keep them. There's certain sketches that hold importance to me in the sense of I can remember the before and after. Energetically speaking, those I keep for me and only me. And then I have given some away. So whatever one I sketch, I'll give to you as a thank you for having me on this podcast. And then I sell my sketches. I tend to sell them though. I do. You talked about energy and channeling earlier, or using my intuition. On one of my pinned reels, I talk about the hand sketches. So I started sketching with the outline on my hand years ago. But what I noticed is I started doing it for somebody that I loved a couple of years ago that was going through a health crisis. And in that process, something happened. I can't describe it any other way than it channeled a spiritual guidance, but I kind of leaned into it. And what I've noticed is now when I sketch other people's hands, I feel like things come to me that aren't for me. They're for that person. And I do it with a positive intention. And so that's a nuance to what I do in terms of sketching for other people. But yeah, that's my answer to your question. I see my sketches are moments in time, just like you were describing with dancing. And so, yeah, I can go back and reflect like a diary, but I don't really have the desire to, because I think all of it is impermanent. So yeah.
And everyone was a moment in time. Yeah, I rarely revisit my own drawings, except when I move or,
exactly. Or
a reason. Yeah. But sometimes I look back at them and I was like, whoa, did I do this?
That actually is the reason I would go back. In my 1 year anniversary. So every year I celebrate my 1 year anniversary. I do reflect back and go, wow, look at all the ways I've evolved. Yeah. There's one part of this that I do want to talk about for some reason that I feel intuitively called to talk about. Is called the plateau. I talk about this in my book.
Yeah.
One of my areas of healing is performance. Remember, I told you I was very academically and performance driven, right? I had to hit every goal. Get to the top of the mountain. That showed up in my art. What happened is I started healing and transforming and changing, and I wanted more and more and more and more. And it got to a point, and I don't even remember when this happened. It's happened a few times, by the way, in my journey, where my sketches felt like there's nothing going on. It's just there. And I'm sketching every day and nothing's coming out. And I would get so frustrated. And I would be so like, oh, should I quit? And I knew I was supposed to confront this feeling because I'm so used to growing and learning and growing and learning. And I'm sharing this because healing is the same way. If we can think about healing the same way we think about our physical bodies, that we have moments of contraction and moments of expansion. And so there are moments where I'm expanding and I'm growing and I'm learning, and wisdom is just pouring into me, and I'm a vessel of wisdom. And then suddenly, now I could be frustrated and say, why no more insights coming in? But my body and my spirit is saying, Sheila, you need to contract. You need to let your muscles relax. You need to integrate all these learnings into your life, and you need to contract. So now I find as much joy and as much wisdom in contraction, in moments of stillness where things aren't pouring in so fast. And I find them as powerful as I do in the moments of expansion. But I could not have gotten there, Ingrid, had I not confronted that fear or that belief that the only way that I am valuable, the only way I am worthy, the only way I can create impact is if I'm constantly growing. And so my art, and I say that because my sketches right now, I'm in a plateau. Like my sketches are starting to feel very similar, and that's okay. But the old me might have judged it and said, oh, change it up, girl. Do sculpting, do collage, and why am I doing that? I'm only doing that because I care about what other people think, but I don't feel that way anymore. You see what I mean? So one of my metaphors that I say, one of the mantras I say, there's nothing happening on paper that isn't showing up in my life. So the plateau is important. That's why I wanted to bring that up, because I think that's relatable to everyone in this world. We're so driven to go, 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 do, and we don't value the stillness.
Yeah, I totally agree. I'm so glad you brought that up. I always try to see, life phases of life as waves. There is the peak of the wave, but there is also the bottom of the wave. And it's part of life. It's like we discussed light and darkness, the wave, it goes again with your drawings. But I had this discussion also with another guest recently that, probably we women have to embrace this in our lives because, we are on a monthly cycle, and throughout the month, we don't feel the same. Whether you like it or not, it's true. So either you embrace it or you try to fight it, but it will still be true, and there are these moments when you can't always be go, go, go. You have to rest. And if you don't rest, you're creating probably more trouble for yourself. And yeah, for men, it's interesting. I really want to have a conversation with a guest about men at some point, because as you said, there are so much doers, like do, provide for their families, etc. And I can see also so many men, when they hit their 40s, there is this, what we call the midlife crisis.
Yeah.
And perhaps this is their plateau. I don't know.
Well, I will take a little bit of a nuance here, depending on your audience. This could be resistance, but I'm going to go down the spiritual path for a second.
Yeah.
In the spiritual world or the wellness world, there's a thing called feminine and masculine energies. And the reason I'm leaning more into that versus gender of male versus female is I'll just speak about me. I have held a lot of masculine energy in my life. And when I think of masculine energy, I think of protector. I think of somebody that is like the warrior, right? The person, versus when I think of feminine, I think of receiving and nurturing, a lot more inward, right? And I haven't really sat in the receiving side. I'm always the doer and the protector. And so what I'm learning in my healing journey is I'm learning to become more feminine, because I don't need to be more masculine anymore. My masculine side showed up because that was my way of surviving this world. Like
we both have both energies.
Exactly. And that's why I'm saying it's a nuance to what you just said, because I feel like the world talks about gender like it's outside of us.
Yeah.
But it's really inside of us, whatever you describe it. That's why I don't call it an identity.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And so for me, if I were to talk to people that are on the path of spirituality or healing, I'd go right there and go, okay, so what part of you are you leaning into? So that's why I'm nuanced. I wanted to add that nuance to this conversation, because this is the way I look at the world. Like when I look at someone, I go, "Ooh, they're very strong masculine." And so if I'm coming to lean in as a masculine energy, we're going to have a different energy than if I lean into my feminine. And so I look at the world that way. And by the way, art's the same way. Flowy lines tend to be associated with feminine energy.
Yeah.
Most people would not, if you showed this to someone, I sketch behind me, most people wouldn't say that comes from a masculine artist, whatever masculine means to you, because I'm very pro LGBTQIA plus, but I'm just saying to you that it's energy. Like my work looks the way it is because I have a strong feminine energy in my work. But yeah, I don't think it's an identity so much as an energy.
Yeah, and I love you brought this nuance. I mean, we see a lot more fluidity in the world today. Certainly in the younger generation, because perhaps, there is more freedom. I don't know. But yeah, I love that you brought that up. So you actually mentioned that you sometimes sketch the outline of your. Oops. There's something coming with this question. So you mentioned you regularly sketch the outline of your hand. So I wanted to ask you why your hands, what is it evocative of for you? Because, I was thinking about this question, and for me, when I think of hands, I immediately think of healing, and I also think of connection.
Well, there you go. That's the answer. It's exactly how I would answer it. What's interesting is, as always with my journey, it's part intuition, part my purpose. So my intuition is, and this is truly the most simple answer. One day I was like, I don't know. I felt like I was bored with just sketching on a piece of paper. This is truly came in from a very innocent place. And I thought, I'm just going to outline my intuition said, just outline your hand and create a different container. Truly, that's all it was. And so I outlined my hand and then I started sketching, and something about being in a container of a hand really intrigued me. I'm like, this is so cool. And then so my first one was my hand, and I did a few of those. And then what I came to learn is the reason my intuition was guiding me there is because in the Eastern medicine, in Eastern culture, the hand is the meridian of the body, meaning there's every part of our hand is connected to some part of our body. And because I was deepening my spiritual practice, because I was deepening my connection to my body, of course, my art would then represent my journey. So like right now, 4 years from now, my art may be different because it's representing where I am in my spiritual path. It's representing where I am on my mental health journey. And so I believe two parts to the answer is one, pragmatic. I just wanted to have an outline to play with. And one is spiritual. It was showing me that, Sheila, what you're doing is deepening. It's becoming bigger than you. And I want you to know it by using an outline of the hand. And I genuinely believe that's what happened. And so now I outline other people's hands. And of course, that was my point of connection. Now, when I outline someone's hand, I immediately connect with them because it's their entire body in that outline in my mind, right?
It's amazing. Yeah, absolutely. So you said that you started your sketches in 2017?
April 19th.
Yeah, okay. And, talking of evolution and plateau, as you just mentioned, I wanted to ask you, what evolution have you seen over the years in your drawings? Because you've been doing this for some time now. And did you see yourself evolve through the sketches?
Confidence is one. I used to be a very self-conscious person, very self-conscious. And of course, that would show up in my art. So my lines were more shaky, uncertain. And now they're more confident. And when I say confident, my lines look more certain. They look very purposeful, very clear, and they're very detailed, as you can see. When I first started, they weren't nearly as detailed. And they weren't as intentional and purposeful because that's where I was at, right? Now, the other shift that happened is they became dimensional. So if you look at my earlier sketches, they were very flat.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Now, when you look at my sketches, people always say they look like they're three-dimensional, but I'm doing a two-dimensional. Yes. But again, that's a expression of where I am in my journey. I don't see the world as flat. I see the world as dimension. Like I see energy and I see, different levels of dimension. And so again, my art's always representing the feeling of where I am and the place and where I am. But what's really interesting, Ingrid, is it's still pen and paper.
Yeah.
It's not like
same tools, right?
I do and I do use watercolor, but there's something beautiful in watching the retrospective of my work and how it mirrors my spiritual journey and my healing journey. It's, to me, that one day I will have a show, and it is, of course, every artist's dream to be in the Met or the MoCA, the MoMA. Of course, it would be my dream.
Let's manifest it, yes.
Yes. But I believe if I were ever to be placed in such a beautiful space, it would be a retrospective of my work, because what I'm trying to show is my art is the embodiment and the manifestation and the expression of a spiritual journey. It is, and I have documented it since the moment I started. Like, how rare is that to have somebody document their spiritual journey in a way that is, evolved through images? So that, to me, and I actually, by the way, I just said that for the first time. So you just gifted me something. I don't think I've ever articulated it that way before, that how unique it is that I have been able to document through images my spiritual journey. I'm going to write that down.
Well, if you do this exhibition, I'm definitely coming. That's for sure.
But that's my future. That'll be my future show. It's truly the documentation of my spiritual journey.
Yeah, that's amazing. So if we take the focus off yourself and onto other people, I wanted to ask you, do you know if SketchPoetic has had a transformative impact on other people? Do you get any feedback from the people who practice with your guidance? And is there any story of transformation from someone that particularly touched you that you could share with us today, perhaps?
The answer is yes. The answer is it always comes in the most unexpected moments. When you write a book and you put yourself out there in the world, you never know who's going to buy it or read it, for that matter. So when somebody has I would just say the love to write to you and reach out, to me, it's a very loving act, because most people, they don't have the time or desire to reach out to an author and say, hey, your book changed my life, so the answer is yes. Every now and then I get messages and I see sketches. So I have seen tens of thousands of sketches. So when I see a person's sketch, I receive it differently than when somebody else would look at it, because it's energetic for me. So I see and feel a lot. An example of somebody that changed my life, I give this example in my workshop, but I'll give it to you now because I think it's a good way to wrap up a lot of what we talked about. In my workshop, I try to get people to sketch their feelings, and more importantly, I try to get them in a place of flow so that the subconscious and unconscious comes in. And one time during my workshop, this woman, I walked to her sketch and she had like an X, and it was a turtle. It looked like a turtle. And I said, what is that? She goes, oh, it's a turtle. I didn't like the way it looked. And I crossed it out. And I said, I understand you crossed it out, but I said, that's not SketchPoetic. SketchPoetic isn't about, can you draw a perfect turtle? I said, next time, if an object comes to mind, focus less on what it looks like. Focus on, why did it even show up? Why would a turtle show up? 30 minutes later, she's crying at the table. I'm like, oh God, what did I say? And at the end of the workshop, she comes up to me, and everyone had left at that point. And she said, Sheila, I did what you said and recommended. I saw a yellow dress. And I started sketching the yellow dress. And I remembered it was a dress my mom used to wear at a lake that we used to go to, and she passed away 6 months ago. And I haven't grieved her fully. And I said, that is SketchPoetic. SketchPoetic isn't about the yellow dress and how it looks. SketchPoetic isn't the turtle you sketched then crossed out. SketchPoetic is, you saw a dress, you sketched it, and you asked, why did I sketch a yellow dress? And she didn't even sketch the yellow, it was a pen. your subconscious and unconscious wanted you to remind you to remember your mom passed away 6 months ago and you're not grieving her. You're pushing it down. And she cried for the first time in a long time. That's the stories that matter to me, because it's not about how beautiful a sketch is. It's those moments where I know that was healing for her. And that is ultimately the gift that I can give to others, is using sketching as a way to tap into that.
That's a beautiful story. Thank you for sharing, Sheila. So looking at contemplation as a topic, I find your drawings truly invite the viewer to stop and contemplate them into more details. And because we live in a fast-paced world, I wanted to ask you this question. How important would you say it is to pause and truly contemplate something? Perhaps as part of your own healing journey, of course.
No, it is everything, because it is what makes it SketchPoetic. It is what makes it healing. I will caveat this, though. Not every sketch has to be that way. Some sketches, similar to I'll just use your ocean, the wave metaphor. Some sketches are plateau. You just do it because you need to be in the habit of sketching. Some are in the crest, the crest part, because you're learning something, you're healing from something, you're grieving something, right? And then some aren't meant to be thought through or meaningful. Trust your gut, because your intuition knows if there's something there. So what will happen, and this happens when you're doodling, this is what I'm saying. People doodle all the time, but they're not doing it to heal. The healing is the rumination. The healing is the meaning making. The healing is, and you know what it is? It's just asking questions. So I minored in philosophy in college. And one of my favorite things about philosophy, which I think more people need to do more of, is ask questions for the sake of asking questions, not to get an answer. So in philosophy, and I'm sharing this because I'm such a geek. In philosophy, when you're doing a philosophical debate, the way you perceive to win the debate is not to answer the question, is to weaken somebody else's argument. So your job is to ask so many questions that the person that answering the questions gets lost in answering them, because you've hit the point where they've hit their wall of answering, because you got to the depths. And that's how I view my sketching. So when I sketch, I ask, why is this coming up? Well, why does that matter? And why am I feeling this way? And why does this person annoy me this way? And why do they annoy me? And what is it that they're doing that annoys? Literally but here's what's really beautiful about this. Can I share why it's so beautiful? Is in trauma, in the world of trauma, there's a thing called hypervigilance. And hypervigilance is a term that people, when they're been in a traumatized state, they're very cued in on everything. They're cued in on body language, on voice. They're cued in. And I had an alcoholic father who would get violent. So I was very hypervigilant. I would know in the morning if he was going to be violent at night. I could just feel it. But here's what's beautiful. The very thing that I used to survive, I used hypervigilance to prepare for violence. I use it now to thrive. Yeah. I use my hypervigilance in my marks. I read into my marks, and it's helping me heal. So the very thing I used to survive in my life, I use to thrive now. Darkness and light. So my hypervigilance is now a skill. By the way, my hypervigilance I used in corporate America. When I did my workshops, I could tell you in a room who was paying attention, not paying attention, who was annoyed, not annoyed. I could tell you who was listening and not listening, because I could read a room really fast. But I learned how to do that from an abusive alcoholic childhood. Yeah. So you see what I'm doing is I'm connecting my life, my experiences, and I'm using it to help myself heal, because I'm starting to ask questions of why did I do it this way? And that's all it is. It's just asking questions. But I just want to give people compassion that not every sketch I do is that. It might be 1 in every 10 sketches. It might be 5 sketches in a row. And then for 50 of my sketches, I don't get those insights. You just have to allow it to happen fluidly.
Yeah, yeah. I loved you talked about philosophy as well. And when you were talking, you reminded me a visit I did to Tibet years ago. And I visited a monastery, and it was full of, monks, young monks who were students. And every day, and perhaps even several times a day, they had this practice. So one student was standing, the other one was sitting in front of them, and then they would exchange roles. But the whole purpose was for one student to ask a question to the other in quite a strong way, and the other had to answer as quickly as possible. And it was like a really interesting debate. And it was full of life. And it's a little bit like what you described, yes, like asking questions just for the purpose of asking questions.
The same getting an answer.
Yeah.
I believe we often, this is why our society is where it's at. If we were to ask questions, it's usually to prove a point or usually to try to get someone to see your point. But when you do it in the process of art and you start to ask questions, you're asking questions you don't have answers to yet. Because you're like, why am I doing this? And why am I seeing this? So what you're learning is you're teaching yourself, and this is the neuroscience of what I do, is my brain started to learn, oh, Sheila's asking questions that she doesn't have answers to. That's new. That's new. And so, of course, because I was doing it on paper, it showed up in my life. And now I start asking people questions intuitively that I don't have answers to because it comes from a genuine place and people receive it as genuine. So they open up. Yeah. Because they feel like Sheila's asking me a question she doesn't have an answer to. That's new. That's refreshing. And so that's what I mean is I was doing it to myself first, then it expanded to other people. Yeah.
Yeah, it almost makes me think it's going back to being more compassionate, more kind, rather than being the lower, the strongest, or the one who's going to have, scream the loudest. You see what I mean?
100%. It is about compassion. If there's one theme of our conversation is it teaches us to be more compassionate to whom? Ourselves. We are so good about being compassionate to the world, terrible at being compassionate to ourselves. Terrible.
Yeah, definitely. So Sheila, going back to your sketching practice, you've been doing one sketch a day for a long time. And I think you said perhaps you're not as consistent now, but that's something that I really picked on because I wanted to ask you, how does one discipline themselves to practice something daily over so many years? Is it something easy, something you found easy, difficult? And did you learn anything from being so disciplined about it? And I'm also asking the question because I can struggle with being disciplined. So I'm really interested in your answer.
Well, compassion's my first answer because to create any habit, you have to do it for a certain number of days and you have to be ready. So I'm going to go back to readiness. That's the compassion. If you have a resistance to doing anything daily, I'll use a great example. I should be stretching more. I don't do it. For whatever reason, I've been told I should stretch more. I cannot, for the life of me, I have such a resistance to it. So I'm unpacking that. So it's no different than sketching. So I've got to tell someone to sketch daily and they're resisting. There's a reason. I have to believe there's a reason you're resisting. So that's the first thing. Have compassion. There's a reason. Once you're ready, though, then I'll answer the question of how do you create a daily habit. There's a few practical ways. A lot of the reasons people are drawn to religion or certain cultures is a thing called a ritual. It's because it feels, there's a reverence to it that we give. So the very first thing I tell people is create a ritual. For example, it could be a cup of coffee. It could be that you do it at the same time of day. It could be that you do it in the same place every day. It could be that you do it with music, a certain song every day. What you do is you create a connection that makes this feel like a ritual. So for me, the reason I think it happened is I went to this one coffee shop. And by the way, I still go to that coffee shop every now and then. Mm-hmm. It's so far away. It's an hour away. But before it used to be where I worked. And so it was like down the street. But I'm sharing that because the coffee shop became kind of like my church in some ways. Like I was like, I'm going to this coffee shop and it feels like my church. It feels like this place of sacred. I use the word sacred and I had reverence because it felt good. You will know. And that's why I'm saying it could be a smell. Maybe you light a candle or incense. There's something about creating a habit with something that is a ritual. That's the first piece of advice I have for you. The second piece of advice I would give people that want to create a habit is always remember the why you're doing it. Because when I started sketching every day, I noticed that I told you I would get plateaued and it felt like meaningless. Like, oh, why am I doing this? And just doing it for the sake. It is the reason when I say to myself, okay, yes, you're plateauing, but there's a reason you're plateauing. So understanding the why you do it and keeping yourself honest and accountable for the why. So if I'm doing it for my health is always important, right? And then I would just say, it's okay that if you miss a day, it's okay that you pause and you take a vacation from it. And your vacation can be just not doing it but if it's too long, then catch yourself. It's like a relationship. When you stop caring, that's usually a sign like, okay, something's up. Like when you start to numb yourself from it, like you're almost like forcing yourself to not feel anything. That's usually a sign that you're trying to avoid something. So yeah, that's my advice.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. And I have a ritual as well to go.
Time boxing. Sorry, one more thing. Time boxing. 10 minutes is my minimum. 10 minutes is nothing. Everyone can do 10 minutes of something.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's a really good one, too. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I will definitely look into your advice. So moving forward and talking of your inspiration and what inspires you, I wanted to ask you, is nature a source of inspiration for you, and how important is it in your practice?
It has become the most important thing. If you asked me this question 3 years ago, I would have said, yeah, it inspires me. Now, it is the thing that inspires me the most. When I say nature, I think of God. When I think of nature, I think of consciousness. I think of nature as in space. Like, I don't think of nature as just Mother Earth.
Yeah.
So nature is synonymous to me with creation. Yeah. Nature reflects everything that makes art healing. It shows duality. It shows seasons. It shows the temporal nature of things. It shows the power of it and the ability for it to destroy everything in its path, but also regenerate. It shows compassion. It gives us life. And so it is not, and you asked me this question earlier, which I love, because nobody's really asked me that before, which is the times when my sketching shifted. In addition to dimension and the black and white that I told you, the other way my sketching, I noticed, is it started to mimic nature. I started to see textures of earth and, like the rim of a tree trunk or the thumbprint of a human being or the flow of a river, the wind. It just came naturally. And sometimes it looks like I'm looking inside a body and I'm seeing cells and blood and muscles. And that's what's happening in my sketching and in my spiritual and healing journey. Is sometimes I feel like I'm looking in the world inside a person's body. And sometimes I'm looking at it as if I'm floating above it all and I see how everything's connected. And I believe that is very much a mirror of what's happening to me as a creator, as an artist. I am nature. I am as much nature as a tree, as a piece of grass, as a living being. And so it has become the ultimate source of inspiration for me is nature.
Yeah, I think it does show how you're connected you are becoming with yourself. Yeah, definitely. And the world you live in. Yeah. We talked about energy, and I wanted to bring up the topic of money because many people struggle with the energy of money. And I've seen you've done a beautiful drawing recently using the shape of a coin. It was so original. And you said that you rejected the energy of money for most of your life. So I wanted to ask you, what is it about money that channels this energy of perhaps both desire and discomfort at the same time in people? And can art help face that type of discomfort?
If there was one wound or area of growth for me that has been consistent, it's my relationship with money. This could be a whole nother podcast in and of itself. It could be a whole book. So I'll just do a drop in the bucket of why it's become mine. When I grew up in the culture that I grew up, I saw money wielded as power, as abuse, as a way to suppress, as a way to condemn. It was always used as a negative energy. It was like, this is what you're worth, and this is what you do, and this is how much you owe me, and this is what you're, it's basically using money as a way to control and to diminish somebody else. So I grew up with that. So imagine growing up with that. Of course, I wanted to swing on the other spectrum and pendulum and say, I don't want money to define me. I certainly don't want anybody with money to define me. So I swung way to the other extreme. And so energy became like water to me. Money would come in, money would go out. So I didn't want to hold on to it because I associated money as negative. And that's why I said in my sketch that you're talking about, when we reject the negative of money, we also reject the good of it because both exist, right? So I can hold on to money and use it for good, which I was doing, but I was just letting it go because I didn't want to touch it. So that's kind of a high level of why money is holds a duality for me. But I want to go back to being an artist, okay? Because this one I think is universal. We are told that when we create and we want to pursue an artist path, that the value of our art is only as good as somebody that collects it and for the price at which it's collected from, right? That's the art world. The art world says you're only a successful artist if you sell your art. And that to me is not the platform in which I stand. The value of my art, and I'm going to say this and I say it and I actually am getting full body energy because I really believe it in this much. I don't believe the value of my art will even be fully realized in my lifetime. And you know how much peace that gives me? Because what it says is, Sheila, you believe so much in what you do and the work that you do that you don't even need to be around for it to be valuable. So I don't define my worth anymore by monetary energy. What I have found, though, is I am compelled to show a path for other artists to say, you can create from a place of healing and live your life purposefully, and sustain like I do it. Like I said, I do this part-time, and you will feel so wealthy in ways that nobody will ever be able to measure. And that's a path I want to show. So I feel compelled to walk this path, not only for myself, but I am imagining adults, but also children that are in high school, middle school, that are like being told they see my path and go, wow, I didn't realize I could go down this path of creating art for me and be happy and be wealthy, because money isn't everything. Now, what I will do is when I do make a lot of money doing what I do, whether it's through my book or my workshops or my art, I want to eventually uplift other people that do what I do in a monetary way, like whether it's buying their art or doing more exhibits to showcase their art. I'm driven to do that, but mostly driven because I want to show that there's a path for arts and healing for the world. There is. You just need to show it.
Oh, you're making me very emotional, baby Sensor. And also because, I do have friends who are artists, and actually more male friends who are artists. And what you're saying, about the value of a piece of art, but, do you really pour yourself, or what are the intentions you pour into the piece of art? It's two very different things. And I think you've put this together absolutely beautifully.
Thank you.
So moving to the next question. Yes, I wanted to ask you, what tools do you use to create? Because we've just been talking about you using a coin to create a piece of art around the theme of money. Recently, I have seen you using a tea bag to start an artwork. So do you start with anything? What's the starting point for you? Is it again open to the mood of the day?
Yes, the answer is simply yes. In fact, it's also what is available to me. I went camping 2 weeks ago, and we have a campfire, and I saw a piece of wood that had the blackened at the end from a fire, and I intuitively thought, why don't I use it to sketch? So it was like charcoal. I always look for stuff around me as inspiration. That's more of an art. I think that's the artist in me. It's always looking for inspiration. But going back to what I was saying earlier, because I'm an advocate for mental health, accessibility matters to me.
Yeah.
A rock on the street can be your tool for sketching. your pavement can be the canvas. And I want more people to speak about art this way, because mental health should be accessible to everyone. Healing is everyone can heal through this medium. And so it doesn't matter if it's a pen, a rock, a finger in the sand. If you look at my Instagram, you'll see I've done all kinds of things. I've sketched on the sand using my finger. Used a stick and created things and sculpted. I use whatever I find. The only thing I do is try to do it daily. So I try to create daily for the sake of my own, to create that habit. But yeah, no, everything is my tool. I've used coffee. Yeah.
I like the message of inclusivity as well. That's really beautiful, and accessibility to everyone. Yeah, absolutely. So, jumping to this question, you curated a wonderful, I actually think that's what prompted me initially to have this podcast with you, because I've seen it relatively recently on LinkedIn, but you curated a wonderful arts and healing exhibit in honor of Mental Health Awareness Month in May this year. And it covered the breadth of mental health topics, and you got entries from all over the world, I think. So I wanted to ask you if you could tell us about this initiative. What was your role? What did you try to do with it? And what was the outcome of it?
Yeah, this is a part of my world we haven't talked about, but I'm very active in the Web3 space. It used to be called NFTs, which, is a controversial area because of crypto and the blockchain. But I stand at the intersection of art, tech, and wellness. When I said I was in corporate America, I was in the tech space, digital art. So digital is kind of where I played. And what matters to me is integrating all my life experiences. So I never wanted to abandon the tech digital background. And so when COVID hit, there was an app called Clubhouse, and everyone started getting on it. It was an audio app. And this is where I met the NFT community. And I will say that definitively, I will defend that movement because I met all these artists. Honestly, it was the people that made it for me. It wasn't about the crypto art, or it really wasn't. And the technology is important too, but why that was such an important part was that. And the reason I'm starting there to answer your question is the arts and healing exhibit came about because in the NFT Web3 space, I'm also a curator. I curate a lot of shows. I did it through collections. And so this year I thought I wanted to curate a show for Mental Health Awareness Month. And I wanted to host an open call on a platform called Hug. And Hug is in the Web3 NFT space. Okay. On the Hug platform, we got 574 submissions. I was only going to select 38. So I thought I was going to get maybe 100 submissions, but I got 574. I was not expecting that. And every submission deserved to be seen. The stories behind the why, because I asked two questions of what inspired this piece and how do you use art to heal, basically. And it took me a long time to go through all of them. And then, the 38 selected artists were shown in New York and LA. And what you said is important too, is that it covered the breadth of, it was everything from eating disorders to bipolar to anxiety to depression to suicide to everything. I mean, it was running the gamut. And the other thing is it also spoke about people that were caregivers of people with mental health issues. So some people create art to manage taking care of someone that's going through mental health. So I even wanted to show that. And then, of course, globally, it had 17 countries represented. I would have loved to have more. And then I had the Healing Collective represented. But the reason I do this is so that I show that arts and healing isn't just about me. There is a collective group of people that believe of what I believe. I just happen to be one of them. And I just want to bring more people along for the ride with me.
It is such an incredible initiative, Sheila. I mean, I thought the idea is so incredible. And it was the first time you did it, right?
It's the first time I did an arts and healing exhibit in that space. But yeah, I've done I did an event with Neo Sutras. Talking about dancing, Neo Sutras is a couple. You can find them on Instagram. But we did an event called Neoform, which was a physical event. But it was all about arts and healing.
Yeah. But I bet you if you make it something repetitive over time, I bet you will reach more and more and more people, because you mentioned it yourself, we all have mental health struggle, more or less important perhaps, or not the same. I loved your reference also to the caretakers of people who perhaps have stronger mental health issues. That's a topic that really touches me. But I bet you if you do it again, because when you do it the first time, not everybody is going to see it.
Yeah.
And then you do it and people see it and like, wow, it resonates. And then you do it a second time and then it's, the community grows. I think if you do it again, perhaps I would participate.
Yes, please do. I mean, I'll do more of these. I'm going to do more, much more. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to see more for sure. So I think you mentioned the Compassion Prison Project, and you are involved in a number of projects like this. So what is it about the Compassion Project that, why did you get involved with it?
Well, I was introduced to the founder, Fritzi Horstman, and I haven't been as engaged with them since post-COVID, just to be really clear.
Yeah.
My interest and connection with them continues because I helped include my SketchPoetic prompts and my work in their book called Trauma Talks. So they have a program called Trauma Talks. I think it's 12 to 16 weeks. I know they've extended it recently. And this program is, Fritzi's goal is to transform prisons into rehabilitation centers, which is what they should be. They're not meant to be imprisoned. They're supposed to be rehabilitated. And so the idea is this program is going to go through to every U.S. prison and help these incarcerated men and women, and also even the correctional officers are traumatized, right? They're in a constant state of fight, flight, or freeze. And so the idea is this book that I was a part of, again, it's all using creative expression as a way to heal. I wrote some prompts in there in the book. So my work is in the Trauma Talks program. But I have been to the Kern Valley prison and did an in-person trauma workshop using art to heal, using watercolor.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you. So I've seen you also saying that sketching opened yourself to other forms of healing, which I'm very interested in, but I think a lot of people are exploring different forms of healings and more from what I can see. So you mentioned meditation, breath work, movement, sound baths, which I've done this year for the first time, quantum healing. Can you tell us about that? How important these explorations into other healing practices, how important are they for you?
They're important because language is important. And you might be wondering why I'm connecting the two. We connect with other people and with ourselves differently. So for example, a sound bath for you might be powerful because you have a genuine and natural inclination for music, right? But somebody may not like sound baths because their ears are irritated, it hurts their ears, or they just don't have an affinity for music. Similar to dancing. Some people are very uncomfortable and self-conscious dancing and movement. Some people love movement. It's natural. So for me, I call it the healing arts. It's an art form. Basically, there are people out there, practitioners, that have a gift. They choose to follow that gift and they teach breath work. They choose meditation. They teach Tai Chi. They teach, somatic healing. To me, that's just a language of wellness. It's just a language of wellness. And so just like a paintbrush versus a pen versus a pair of scissors and collage versus acrylic versus oil, it's just a different toolkit. That's how I see it. And so the answer is, why aren't we giving people all different types of tools? Because this tool might work better for you versus this one. I'm not possessive of sketching. I'm not possessive of art. What I want is that to let people know that, did you know art could heal? Because I did not know, and somebody had told me. And so it's the same thing with breathwork and all this. It has powerful effects. There's a ton of science behind all of this stuff, but choose one that resonates with you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you made that very clear throughout this conversation. And I love that, because there is a diversity of paths you can take, and it's up to people to choose what resonates and works for them. So, Sheila, you have celebrated 7 years of SketchPoetic in April this year. What would you say has been your most powerful learning from these 7 years?
Oh,
I always say this to every guest. People hate it when I ask them to choose just one thing.
yeah. No, I'll just go with my gut.
Yeah.
Our body is one of the most powerful intuitive tools. When we talk about intuition, we often talk about this idea of a third eye, the gut. It's this feeling. It's like this thing. It's intangible. It isn't. Your intuition, your body is often trying to tell you something. And I'm not even just talking about trauma. I'm talking about of all the whatever your spiritual belief is, of all the vessels I chose to sit in, this is the one I chose, right? This is the one I chose. This is how this vessel is going to age. This is how the vessel is being perceived by the world. And so I'm saying this, what sketching taught me is like what you yield with your pen, the way I yield my pen is going to be very different, but we're using the same tool. So we are all in a human vessel, but how we show up in the world is going to be expressed differently. And that's the biggest lesson, is that what I do with my pen, nobody else can do. It is what got me confidence, gained me confidence. It's what helped me heal. It's what helped me find purpose, because this pen helped me find it. But everyone could grab a pen, but they won't walk the same path I walk. And that is what art does, is there's no one person that can create the same apple, the same, the same drawing. We can look at the same object, but we're looking at it differently. That is the lesson. That is the healing. And that is what's going to unite us as a world, is that if we can remember that we are all just expressing and feeling and collectively just trying to figure ourselves out. And we're just having to bump into each other, and we're just living art. It's almost like this living art. We're like living beings creating all the time, and just having and seeing the world that way has probably been the biggest, like truly the biggest healing for me.
Yeah, I love your focus on the body, because we are in the physical realm for a reason, right?
The only thing that
not
makes us
discard that.
Yeah, it's the thing that makes us unique.
Yeah, definitely. So looking ahead, what are your desires for the future? What direction do you want to give to SketchPoetic for the next years ahead? And
I try to find the balance of surrendering to the process, meaning I don't have an answer sometimes. But what I can tell you is the impact I want to make. Yeah. That's probably the best way to do it, because I don't like to answer with a vision of what it's going to look like, because I know that's limiting for me. Yeah. That's not how I live my life. The impact I want to make is this: whether in my lifetime or not in my lifetime, I want people to associate art with healing. I want them to know that they can walk a path of art and not worry about monetizing it, making a living off of it, that you can just do it to heal. I want to help others heal so that they can create impact in the world and help be connected to something greater than themselves. So it's like a layer, right? If I can help people find healing, once you start to heal, you can't help but want to be of service to the greater good. I just know that happens. This is what happened to me. So you become of service to the greater good. So that is truly the two-part answer to your question. How that's going to happen, that could happen through workshops. It could happen through another book. It could happen through me becoming an artist that does find external success, and I'm able to have a bigger platform. I don't know what it's going to look like, Ingrid, but I am very certain that I answered a call, and I'm living my purpose every day, and I know I'm still living it, and I don't know what it's going to look like tomorrow, let alone 5 years from now or by the end of my life. But I have trust that it's all divinely designed.
Oh yeah, and you're definitely living your purpose. I mean, it's just so obvious throughout this conversation, and it's amazing because what you're sharing is invaluable, I think, for people. So yeah, think we can all thank you for that, and hopefully we can reach more people to discover what you do. So we talked about your use of color, and especially black and white in your art. I wanted to ask you this: how important is color to you as part of your art? Do you use only black and white?
Oh, it's funny that you should ask this. In the beginning of each year, I used to do a word. That's a thing that a lot of people do. Instead of a New Year's resolution, you do a word. This year, mine was Technicolor Dreams. And it represented, it's on one of my pinned posts on my Instagram. I did my biggest painting I've ever done. It was like 5 foot. And what I was trying to represent in color is that while I will continue to do my daily sketching, I will continue to do black and white. What color introduces for me is the dream state. It's a different realm that I'm exploring. And so I know most people would not draw the connection of color to dreaming. But what's happened in my journey is that I am starting to look at my dreams as a way of healing. Like I ask a question and every now and then a dream will show up to answer that question. So I'm exploring what I call the ethereal dream state. And by the way, the indigenous cultures use dreaming all the time to heal. And so for me, color becomes synonymous with that, because in the dream state, it's not black and white. It's like dimension and color, and it's all kinds of things. So color to me, and you're not surprised to hear that, of course, my answer is very spiritual, philosophical, ethereal. Color isn't color to me. Color represents a depth and different dimension of my art and my expression. So I'm leaning more into color lately for that reason. The other thing color does is it helps connect to people that I normally wouldn't connect with, because not everyone likes black and white. You don't know how many times people tell me, do you ever color your sketches, or when are you going to do more color? Because that's what we like. And I'm like, look, I don't create for you, and I get it. But so I just know that when I start to play with color, I'll open up a new audience. And that's just a natural evolution, but it's not the reason why I'm doing it. The reason is mostly because I want to tap into more of the different dimension of my art.
Yeah. No, that's a beautiful answer. And I love how authentic you are with yourself. If there is one thing I took from you from this conversation, is probably that. Like, you know where you stand and you stick to it no matter what, without forcefully external influences. And I really love that about you. So, Sheila, I end this podcast with the same last question that links to what we've just discussed. But if you were a color, what would it be and why?
It would be purple.
Really?
For many reasons, actually. There's a really cute answer to that question, and then there's a more spiritual answer to that question. But the cute answer is, when my daughter was growing up, she did this painting of 3 owls, and it was a mom, dad owl, and her. And the dad owl was blue and the mom owl was red, because at the time red was my favorite color. My husband's favorite color is blue, and she was a combination, and she was only like 4 or 5, and she did purple, and the color depicted unity, like this beautiful love of 2 people, red and blue. So that's the cute answer to the question. The other answer to the question is, red is very warm, blue is very cold. It's a cool color. So I love the idea, again, because I embody duality. I embody the whole holistic health. So I love the idea of warm and cool colors coming together to make purple. And then the spiritual answer is in the chakras. Purple is the crown chakra. It's the highest state. White, well, clearly white is the ultimate, but purple is considered the highest state of alignment when you're in a complete alignment. And so my goal as an artist, as a creator, as a person that advocates for healing, to have complete alignment. And once you're in complete alignment, the purple chakra is but that's my 3-part answer, because all 3 are important to me.
Beautiful answer. Love it. Thank you for that, Sheila. And thank you for taking part to this podcast, for the conversation today. It's been a long one, but very worthwhile one?
Yes, it was worthwhile. Thank you.
Very good conversation, and I'm sure people will take a lot from it. So thank you for joining today. Thank you to everybody for watching and listening, and I will see you again very soon. Thank you, Sheila.
Thank you.